We're going to find out exactly what was on that key in just a moment. But first, I want to feel connected to you tonight. Scroll down and let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? And what time is on your clock right now? They say you never hear the bullet that kills you. But in the corporate world, it's not a bullet. It's the silence. It's the way the air conditioning hums a little too loudly when 12 people around a mahogany table stop breathing, waiting for you to fall. I remember the temperature of the room that morning. It was freezing. The kind of artificial cold that settles into your bones and makes your joints ache. I was 46 years old, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics firm, and I felt like a cornered animal. The board members, they were like sharks in expensive suits. Vance, the chairman, was drumming his fingers on the glass table. Tap, tap, tap. That sound was driving a spike right through my temples. I hadn't slept in 3 days. The fraud allegations were closing in, lies, all of them, but I couldn't prove it yet. My patience was frayed, worn down to a single snapping thread. And then the door opened. It was Elena. She shouldn't have come in. I had given strict orders. No interruptions. But there she was, my 24-year-old assistant, holding a stack of files against her chest like a shield. She looked so out of place. Amidst the gray suits and the sharp edges of the boardroom, she was soft. She wore that cream-colored blouse I liked, the one that made her look professional but still approachable. Her hair was pulled back, but a few strands had escaped, framing a face that was usually bright with curiosity. Today, though, she looked terrified. "Arthur," she whispered, stepping into the lion's den. She didn't call me Mr. Sterling when it was urgent. "I need to show you." "Not now, Elena," I snapped, not looking up from my notes. "But sir, the quarterly reports, they—" I said not now. My voice cracked like a whip. The room went dead silent. Vance stopped tapping his fingers. He smirked. That smirk triggered something ugly in me. Paranoia. Pride. I felt like she was undermining me, showing the sharks that I couldn't control my own office, let alone the company. I stood up. My chair scraped violently against the floor. The noise was jarring. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And instead of seeing the only person who had stayed loyal to me while the ship was sinking, I saw a liability. I saw a witness to my failure. "You don't listen, do you?" I said, my voice dropping to a cold, lethal register. "I don't need an assistant who can't follow basic instructions. I need professionals." And clearly, I gestured vaguely at her, at the files, at her youth. "You are out of your depth." Her eyes went wide. I saw the color drain from her face, leaving her pale. Her lips parted, a silent gasp of shock. "Leave the files," I commanded, pointing at the table. "And clear out your desk. You're done, Elena. You are dismissed. Effective immediately." It was cruel. It was public. It was unnecessary. For 3 seconds she didn't move. I could hear her breathing shallow, shaky breaths. I expected her to cry. I expected a scene. Part of me wanted a scene, something to justify my anger. But she didn't cry. She slowly straightened her spine. The fear in her eyes hardened into something else. Disappointment? No, it was pity. She looked at me not with hatred, but with a profound sadness, as if she was watching a man jump off a cliff and couldn't stop him. She walked forward, the heels of her boots clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. Click, click, click. She placed the files on the table gently. No slamming. No drama. Then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small silver USB drive attached to a simple ring. She held it for a moment, the metal catching the harsh fluorescent light. She looked at me one last time, her brown eyes searching mine, waiting for the man I used to be to surface. But I just stared back, stone-faced. She set the keys down on the glass in front of me. "Goodbye, Arthur," she said softly. And then she walked out. I didn't know it then, watching the door swing shut behind her. But I had just signed my own death warrant. And God help me, I deserved it. The sun went down, and the city lights of Chicago flared to life outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. Usually that view made me feel like a king. Tonight it just made me feel small. The boardroom was empty. The sharks had swum away, satisfied that they had seen me bleed. Vance had clapped me on the shoulder on his way out, a gesture that felt more like a burial rite than a comfort. I was alone. I sat at my desk, the leather creaking under my weight. The silence in the office was absolute. No phones ringing. No typing. And worst of all, no Elena. My eyes kept drifting to the spot on the glass desk where she had left it. That small silver USB drive. It sat there, innocent and unassuming, catching the blue light from my monitor. It was attached to a simple woven keychain, something cheap, maybe handmade. It looked ridiculous against the expensive Italian furniture. I reached out and picked it up. It was still warm. Or maybe that was just my imagination trying to find a trace of her warmth in the cold metal. I twirled it between my fingers. Why had she given me this? Was it a resignation letter? A list of grievances? A final screw you for the way I'd humiliated her? I wouldn't have blamed her. With a heavy sigh, I leaned forward and plugged it into my laptop. Click. The computer chirped. A window popped up. I expected a Word document. Maybe a PDF. Instead, I saw folders. Dozens of them. And the file names. They made my breath catch in my throat. XLS. Offshore underfront. Audio underfront. My hand froze on the mouse. I opened the first folder. It was everything. Every single lie Vance had told. Every dollar they had siphoned off and tried to pin on me. Every fake signature. It was a roadmap of corruption detailed down to the cent. I clicked on a text file labeled simply, "For Arthur." It was short. "I knew you were too proud to look for the dirt on them. You think everyone plays by the rules because you do. But they were going to frame you, Arthur. I couldn't let that happen. Please, use this. Even if you hate me for finding it." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. She hadn't been neglecting her work. She hadn't been out of her depth. For months, while I was barking orders and drowning in stress, she had been working in the shadows. She had been risking her own job, maybe even her safety, to build a life raft for me. And when she tried to give it to me, when she tried to save my life, I fired her. A scent hit me then. Faint but undeniable. Vanilla. It was her perfume. It lingered on the chair opposite my desk where she used to sit during our morning briefings. It was a soft, sweet smell, totally at odds with the sterile lemon-scented polish of the office. It smelled like home. It smelled like loyalty. I closed my eyes, and the image of her face in the boardroom flashed behind my eyelids. The hurt. The quiet dignity. She had held the key to my salvation in her hand, and I had treated her like garbage. "Elena," I whispered. The name hung in the empty room, unanswered. I looked at the screen again. The evidence was enough to destroy Vance, to burn the whole board to the ground, but looking at it didn't feel like victory. Felt like ash. I had the keys to the kingdom back. But I had just locked out the only person who actually gave a damn about the king. There is a specific kind of quiet that comes right before you drop a bomb. I sat there for an hour just staring at that send button. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew what would happen if I clicked it. The SEC, the press, the legal teams, they would descend on this building like locusts. Vance would be ruined. But so would the company. And so would I. I was the CEO. It happened on my watch. Even if I was the whistleblower, I was the captain of the Titanic. Nobody hires the guy who steered the ship into the iceberg, even if he's the one who called for the lifeboats. I thought about my reputation. 20 years of climbing ladders, shaking hands, building an empire. Then I thought about Elena. I thought about the way she stood in that boardroom, holding on to her dignity while I tried to strip it away. She was 24. She had nothing, no golden parachute, no offshore accounts, yet she was willing to risk everything for the truth. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor. I looked old. Not in years but in spirit. I had become a man who weighed morality against profit margins. I didn't want to be that man anymore. I clicked. Sent. The destruction was efficient. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the lobby was full of federal agents. By noon, Vance was being escorted out in handcuffs, screaming obscenities that echoed off the marble walls. He looked at me as they shoved him into the car. Pure hatred. I just straightened my tie. The board demanded my resignation, of course. For the good of the shareholders, they said. I signed the papers without reading them. I didn't care about the severance package. I didn't care about the non-compete clauses. Packing my office felt strange. I didn't take much. A photo of my parents. A fountain pen. And that silver USB drive. I put it in my breast pocket right over my heart. Walking out of the building that last time was a sensory overload. The revolving doors spun me out onto the street and into a wall of noise. Flash, flash, flash. The paparazzi were blinding. Microphones were shoved in my face like weapons. Mr. Sterling. Did you know? Mr. Sterling. Is it true the company is bankrupt? I didn't answer. I pushed through the crowd, the physical sensation of their bodies pressing against me, the shouting, the chaos. But as I reached the curb and the heavy door of my town car closed, shutting out the noise, I felt something I hadn't felt in a decade. Lighter. I loosened my tie. I undid the top button of my shirt and took a deep breath. The air in the car was recycled and stale, but it tasted sweet. I had destroyed my career. The headlines the next day would call me a fallen titan. My phone was already blowing up with contacts deleting my number. But as the car pulled away, merging into the gridlock of the city, I realized something. Elena didn't just give me evidence. She gave me a mirror. She showed me that the age gap between us wasn't just about years. It was about cynicism versus hope. She still believed that doing the right thing mattered. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. I had burned down my kingdom. Now I just had to find the woman who lit the match. It took me 2 weeks to build up the courage to find her. Finding her wasn't the hard part. I knew she volunteered at a community garden on the south side every Thursday. I knew that because I used to read her schedule just to know where she was when she wasn't at her desk. The hard part was looking in the mirror and deciding who was going to show up. The CEO was dead. Arthur Sterling, the corporate titan, didn't exist anymore. So I put on a gray wool sweater and a pair of dark jeans. I looked normal, vulnerable. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't have a suit of armor. The garden was tucked behind an old brick library. It was a mess of life. Overgrown tomato vines, sunflowers drooping with the weight of seeds, the smell of wet earth and rain. It was the complete opposite of the sterile glass box I had spent my life in. I saw her immediately. She was kneeling by a bed of marigolds, her back to me. She was wearing a thick, oversized cardigan that swallowed her small frame, and her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, held together by a pencil. I stood by the gate for a long time, just watching. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat was now terrified of a 24-year-old girl with dirt on her hands. I took a step. Crunch. The sound of my boot on the gravel path was deafening in the quiet afternoon. She froze. She didn't turn around immediately. I think she knew. Maybe she felt it. That strange magnetic pull that had always been there, humming beneath the fluorescent lights of the office. She slowly stood up, wiping her gloved hands on her jeans. She turned. When our eyes met, the air left the garden. She looked tired. There were shadows under those expressive brown eyes. But when she saw me, her guard went up. She crossed her arms, protecting herself. "Arthur," she said. Her voice was flat, guarded. "Elena," I replied. My voice sounded rusty. I walked closer, but I stopped a good 6 feet away. I didn't want to invade her space. I had taken enough from her already. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning my sweater, my unstyled hair. "I am different," I said. "I'm unemployed." A flicker of a smile touched her lips, but she hid it quickly. "I saw the news. You burned it all down." "I used the lighter you gave me," I said softly. The wind rustled the dried leaves around us. I watched a strand of hair fall across her face. My hand twitched, an instinctive urge to reach out and tuck it behind her ear. But I didn't. I hadn't earned that right. Instead, I lowered my head. It was a gesture of total submission. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," I said, looking at the gravel between our feet. "I came to tell you that you were right. About the company. About Vance. And about me." I looked up, meeting her gaze. I let her see the regret. I let her see the man, not the boss. "I humiliated you because I was afraid." I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I was drowning, Elena. And you were the only one trying to pull me to the surface. And I struck you for it. I am profound, deeply sorry." She stared at me. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. Then she took a step forward. The distance between us closed just a fraction. "You look better without the tie," she said quietly. And in that simple sentence I heard the one thing I didn't think I'd ever hear again. Hope. She took me to a place called Jerry's. It was a narrow neon-lit diner wedged between a laundromat and a bakery. The kind of place I would have driven past in my limousine without even turning my head. But following her inside, watching the bell above the door jingle as she waved to the waitress, it felt like entering a sanctuary. We slid into a booth in the back. The red vinyl was cracked, taped over with silver duct tape. The table was small, intimately small. My knees brushed against hers under the table, and for the first time in my life I didn't pull away. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up my spine, sharper than any caffeine. 2 coffees black, she told the waitress, not even asking me. She remembered. Of course she remembered. She knew my coffee order better than I knew my own social security number. When the mugs arrived, thick and chipped, steam curling into the air between us, the silence finally broke. "Why did you really come, Arthur?" she asked. She wasn't looking at me. She was tracing the rim of her mug with her index finger. "I told you," I said, leaning forward, "to apologize." "You could have sent an email," she countered. She looked up then, her gaze piercing. "Men like you don't come to the South Side in a sweater unless they're looking for something else." "I'm not men like me anymore, Elena," I said softly. "I'm just a guy who blew up his life and realized the only thing worth saving was the opinion of the woman sitting across from him." She held my gaze. The air between us changed. It shifted from awkwardness to something thicker, warmer. The sounds of the diner, the clattering plates, the sizzling grill, faded into the background. She reached across the table. For a second I thought she was going to take my hand. My heart hammered an erratic rhythm against my ribs. But she didn't take my hand. Her fingers brushed the lapel of my jacket. "Your collar," she whispered. "It's twisted." It was such a simple thing. A mundane, everyday action. In the office she might have pointed it out verbally. "Sir, your tie is crooked." Professional. Detached. But here. Her fingertips lingered on the fabric near my neck. The back of her hand grazed my skin just above the collarbone. Her touch was warm, ghost-like, yet it burned. I stopped breathing. I sat frozen, terrified that if I moved, the moment would shatter. She smoothed the fabric down, her eyes focused on the task, her lashes lowering. I watched her face, the focus, the care. It wasn't the care of an assistant fixing a boss for a meeting. It was the care of a woman fixing a man because she wanted him to look his best. She pulled her hand back slowly, but her eyes stayed on mine. "Better," she said. Her voice was breathy. "Thank you," I managed to rasp out. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized the power dynamic had completely flipped. I used to be the one giving orders, the one in control. But right now, in this cheap booth with the smell of burnt coffee in the air, I was completely at her mercy. She took a sip of her coffee to hide a sudden flush in her cheeks. "So," she said, her voice trying to find its footing again, "now that you're not a CEO, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?" I smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt foreign on my face. "I was hoping you might have some ideas," I said. And for the first time in months she smiled back. The drive to her apartment was a blur of streetlights and shadows. My car, usually a mobile office where I made calls and checked stocks, felt different tonight. It felt smaller, more intimate. With the rain drumming against the roof and the heater humming softly, it felt like a cocoon that had trapped the two of us inside. I pulled up to the curb outside her building. It was an old brick walk-up with a flickering light over the entrance. I put the car in park, but I didn't unlock the doors. I couldn't let her go. Not yet. The engine idled beneath us, a low vibration that traveled through the leather seats. "You should go," I said. But I didn't look at her. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "I know," she replied. But she didn't move. I turned my head. In the dim light of the dashboard, her face was illuminated in soft greens and ambers. She was looking at me with that same intensity she had in the diner, but now, stripped of the noise and the people, it felt dangerous. "Arthur," she started, her voice trembling slightly, "why are you really here? You cleared your name. You destroyed the board. You don't owe me anything else." "I don't owe you?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. I turned my body in the seat to face her fully. The leather creaked. A sharp sound in the quiet space. "Elena, I owe you my life. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? I looked at her hands resting in her lap. They were small, capable hands. The hands that had held the keys to my salvation. I reached out. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, waiting for her to pull away to tell me to stop. She didn't. She watched my hand approach hers, her breath hitching in her throat. I covered her hand with mine. The contact was electric. Her skin was soft, warm. My hand looked weathered next to hers, a visual reminder of the years between us. The age gap that I had used as a shield, as an excuse, as a wall. I ran my thumb slowly over her knuckles. Back and forth. A soothing, possessive rhythm. I lied to myself for 2 years. I whispered, my voice rough with emotion. I told myself you were just an employee. I told myself I was mentoring you. I told myself I was too old, too jaded, too damaged for someone like you. She turned her hand over, interlacing her fingers with mine. She squeezed back. A silent permission. When I fired you. I choked on the words. I looked up, locking eyes with her. I didn't fire you because of the files, Elena. I didn't fire you because I thought you were incompetent. I leaned in closer. The space between us vanished. I could smell the vanilla perfume, warmer now, mixed with the scent of the rain on her coat. I fired you because I couldn't breathe when you were in the room, I confessed. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I was terrified. Every time you looked at me, I felt my control slipping. I fired you because I was falling in love with you, and I didn't know how to stop it. Her eyes filled with tears, catching the light. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She simply lifted her free hand and placed it on my cheek. Her palm was cool against my skin. She ran her thumb over the line of my jaw, accepting the man beneath the suit, the scars and the years. Then don't stop, she whispered. And in the silence of that car, with the world outside forgotten, the CO died, and the man finally came alive. They say that when you lose everything, you find out who you really are. 6 months ago, I was a man in a 3-piece suit standing in a glass tower, commanding an army of employees but trusting no one. I was the king of logistics. And I was the loneliest man in Chicago. Today, I'm sitting in a sun-drenched kitchen in a renovated brownstone. The table isn't made of cold glass. It's oak, scratched and warm. There are no board members here. No shareholders. Just a laptop, a stack of blueprints for our new boutique consultancy firm, and a plate of burnt toast that I wouldn't trade for a Michelin star meal. I heard her footsteps on the stairs before I saw her. Elena walked into the kitchen, wearing one of my old dress shirts that hung down to her knees. Her hair was loose, catching the morning sun like a halo. She wasn't carrying files or agendas. She was carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You're staring again, she teased, setting the mug down in front of me. I'm admiring my business partner, I corrected, reaching out to catch her by the waist. I pulled her closer, and she settled naturally against my side, her hand resting on my shoulder. We weren't boss and assistant anymore. We were Arthur and Elena, equals. The transition hadn't been easy. The media tore me apart for weeks. My bank accounts took a hit. The circles I used to run in, the country clubs, the galas, they closed their doors to me. But as those doors closed, others opened. Real ones. We started small, helping ethical startups navigate the corporate shark tank. It was work that mattered. And for the first time in 20 years, I slept through the night. I have something for you, she said, breaking my reverie. She reached into the pocket of my shirt she was wearing. My heart did a familiar, nostalgic flip. The last time she reached into a pocket to give me something, she handed me a USB drive that blew up my life. She pulled out her hand, but this time it wasn't a silver data stick. It was a set of brass keys. Real keys. Attached to a leather fob with our initials stamped into it. The lease came through, she smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. For the new office downtown. The one with the brick walls and the big windows. I took the keys. They felt heavy. Solid. The last time you gave me keys, I said, running my thumb over the brass, I lost an empire. She laughed. A sound that filled the kitchen and chased away the last shadows of the man I used to be. She leaned down, her forehead resting against mine. You didn't lose an empire, Arthur, she whispered. You just traded a prison for a home. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of her. Coffee and vanilla and life. I pulled her into a hug, burying my face in the crook of her neck. It wasn't a desperate hug, or a fearful one. It was the embrace of a man who knows exactly where he belongs. I looked at the keys in my hand, and then at the woman in my arms. The world thought I had crashed and burned. They thought the age gap was a scandal, that my resignation was a tragedy. Let them think that. I kissed her temple, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on our backs. I think, I said, my voice thick with gratitude, that I got the better end of the deal. Arthur gave up a corporate empire to find a home in a small kitchen with Elena. He traded power for peace. It makes me wonder about you. If you were in Arthur's shoes and you had to choose between a career that guaranteed you status or a person who guaranteed you love, which key would you keep? Tell me in the comments below, power or peace. I read every single story you share. And if Arthur and Elena's journey touched your heart tonight, please leave a like and subscribe. It tells me you're ready for the next chapter. Until then, sleep well.